There is a not-so-fine line between the explanation and the reason. This is Wretched Radio. George Will, Washington Post, taking off on Senator Ben Sasse's new book, Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal It. Now, I haven't read the book, so all I can tell you is I don't know how he plans to heal it, but if we're not careful, we're going to be just trimming. We're trimming the edges of the leaves of a tree that's dying and not addressing the root, because there's a difference between the explanation and the reason. Let me share this with you from George Will, and methinks this will become clear. The public health problem is loneliness. Political problem, partisanship. The public health problem is loneliness. And Will goes on to cite all of the statistics that point toward we're a lonely country. I say this is a gospel opportunity. Will writes, Sasse's subject is the evaporation of social capital, the satisfactions of work and community. So it sounds like, at least in part, that's Ben's solution, that we need work and we need community. Hold it. That's the explanation for loneliness, but that's not the reason. What's the reason? If work and community is an explanation, what's the reason? Here it is. You were meant to be in relationship with God. That is how you were designed. You reflect your Maker, who is a Trinitarian God in relationship with himself. And when you're not in community, you're just going against the grain. You're like I don't want to get all builder-like on you, but you're like, is it a plane? The thing that, like with the wood, you're going against the grain versus with the grain? That's the reason people feel loneliness. Do you see the difference? Why work? That's the explanation. People aren't working. They don't have a really good theology of vocation. That would explain why they don't feel fulfilled, but that's not the reason. The reason is God works. You're made in his image and you were made to work. That is a line that we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of. Otherwise, we'll simply join George Will in trying to explain the problem. No, we can give an explanation, but only Christians have the reason for it. It goes down deeper than just here's the presenting problem. With social media, it's causing us to be disjointed. Yep. But why is that bad? That explains perhaps the reason for some loneliness, but it doesn't explain why that makes you lonely. You hear the difference between explaining and reason? The explanation for social media is, look, you're just doing everything separately. Just everything that you do. I was thinking about this. If we had somebody, let's say we stayed at somebody's home recently, and we had a lovely time, and they were very gracious in hospitality. I thought of this because recently we did stay at somebody's home in Texas, and they were amazingly gracious. And hospitable? Did I say hospitality?
Yes.
Hospitalitableness. We stayed at their home. Now, let's just say we wanted to give, let's say they lived locally, and we wanted to express our gratitude 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago for sure. What would you have done? Well, you would have gone to the store and shopped. Maybe you would have had an interaction with a clerk. You would have talked to somebody. You would have made a transaction. You would then have to go to another store to buy the wrapping paper, another communication between another human being. And then you'd actually give it to the person. Hey, this is for you. Let's get together for lunch so I can give this to you. And what do you have? Human interaction. That was 50 years ago, 30 years ago if you want. How would that transaction take place today? Amazon.com, purchase and send. Done. Do you see what's missing there? Human interaction. And because of that, culturally, we feel lonely. But that's only the explanation. What's the reason? Because you're not meant to be an island. You're not meant to be a standalone entity. You're not meant to go through this life by yourself. And this is especially true from the Christian perspective of church and unity and fellowship of believers. This is a group thing we are doing. Yes, salvation is individualistic, but we're doing this group thing as the church. Why? Because that's the way we're made to be. This is what we were made for. And when you're not behaving like that, you're going backwards on. You're getting shredded on the cheese shredder, grater thingy. Again, I don't want to get all technological with the foodie terms here. Or the plane on the wood, you're scratching the cat backwards. You're just not doing it right. It's going to feel rotten. That explains. The reason is because this is the way God has made you. With that in mind, would like to introduce you to a Q Talk. I have to confess, I haven't watched many of these. On occasion, somebody will send them in because they can either be super good or a super stinker. Nevertheless, this was a Q Talk, and from a fellow named Andy Crouch. And I don't think that I would agree with Andy on a fair amount of theology. He's a biologos guy. But looking past that, he knocked one out of the park, explaining why we're so lonely. Would like to share this with you. This is more of a sociological look. So this is going to explain, in part, why people are lonely, but it is not going to give the reason. It's up to us to provide that. So here's the historical explanation.
So these are our three great revolutions, and they stack on top of one another. Wealth from land to money, work from bodies to engines, and then it really gets going once you have knowledge shift from wisdom to information. The primary obvious result of these three revolutions has been unbelievable prosperity, of which everyone in this room is in one way or another a beneficiary.
What's he talking about? The history of our society in the West. The Medicis with the banking system, we went from land to money. When we hit the Industrial Revolution, the end of the 19th century, we went from labor to engines. We really went from farming to factory, and then the technological information. So it's no longer seeking out wisdom. It's having information stored all over the place. Now, are those good things? Yeah, I think we'd all agree they are. Life is easier. I mean, when it comes to physical things, food, clothing, bathing, it's much easier. Life is faster. We get more stuff done. We can be more productive. But it comes at a cost.
In the midst of all this abundance and prosperity, there seems to be something not quite right. And here's what I'm starting to think it's about. I wonder if what's going on in all three of these revolutions is a kind of trade of personhood for power.
All right. Now, maybe that's going to sound a little bit highfalutin. Whether you agree with that or not, I think it's the overall bolo punch that this presentation delivers. We have made a trade. We've got benefits on the one hand, but we've got a trade-off on the other hand. And the issue seems to be leading toward one of the reasons why so many people feel lonely.
Money is basically an impersonal medium of exchange. It's a way to exchange value with other human beings without having to be embedded in relationship with them. So I go to the convenience store, and I have no idea who this person is behind the counter. I've got my Walker's shortbread or whatever. I've got my credit card, or now I can just wave my phone in the general direction of the payment terminal. And money is liberated from my credit account. It's not even a physical thing. It's just a set of symbolic representations of wealth. And Wawa gets what it wants. It gets the money. I get what I want. I get the snack. The cashier gets paid by Wawa. I never learn that person's name. That person doesn't know my name. Sometimes we don't even make eye contact. Sometimes I try to make eye contact. I realize they're not interested in looking at me. And I assure you that there are people at Wawa working on getting rid of that counterpart person behind the counter because they're really rather vestigial at this point.
Would you please allow me to exercise my spiritual gift of beating the horse? Thank you. That's the explanation. Everything is, it's not very personal. And I see this happening a lot, especially the bigger the city, the more impersonal it becomes. But a transaction used to be, okay, what have you got? A chicken? I've got a barrel of wheat or a bushel of wheat. To maybe use the correct agricultural term, let's talk about what the trade could look like here. No more voop, voop, out the door of the Wawa, which is apparently a chain in Pennsylvania. That is impersonal, and that is the explanation for why so many people are lonely.
It's so normal to us, it's so routine, that we forget that at any other time in history, and indeed for billions of people today, the idea that you would live in this disengaged way, that all your transactions would be mediated impersonally, is unthinkable.
Indeed. And that explains why so many people are feeling like an island. In other words, like Paul Simon is what they're feeling like. And that explains it, but that does not give us the reason. The Bible explains why the effect of this disjointed, impersonal society is loneliness, because we're not made to be this way. This is Wretched Radio.